Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to HIMediaTV. I am your host, Evan from HIMediaTV, and welcome back to another chapter of my little black book, the daily-ish vlog show, where I yap into a microphone for an indeterminate amount of time, and you listen for some reason. Today, I want to talk about dating. Specifically, I want to talk about the ick. And the ick is something that I have felt to some kind of degree before, but it's usually been because somebody had said something or done something while I was on a date with them or we were talking where it just made me feel uncomfortable. Right? They say they love me after like 2 dates and a shag, or they start talking, asking really probing details on a first date. And you guys know me. I have no ego or shame. I very much am an open book in a lot of cases. So, it takes a lot for me to feel uncomfortable. This was the first time I got the ick from somebody's behavior. And I feel like I understand partially, how women say they get the ick. So let me lay the scene. At time of recording, I am talking to a handful of different women. This particular one, I was supposed to have, had an engagement sparkle this past weekend. Today, in fact, at time of recording, or rather yesterday, because it's 1:00 in the morning at time of recording. And, she just had a rough weekend. She was just great. She worked she works as a manager at a restaurant, and, it's Friday and Saturday, she's dying. And, she was like, I wanted to read and check for next week. Things are a little rough. I need some me time. And I'm like, I completely understand that. Genuinely. Here's the thing. She, had a job she hated, took a job out here. The job in question paid for her room and board, and, it's part of her thing, and, they really wanted her to stay and things of that nature. Great. She's my age, and, she's very different from me, which I'm not against. I have loved the rainbow. I have no problem, making a connection with somebody who is different, and especially if they are open to learning about my interests too, which she was. She was she says, I'm not against video games or nerd culture or anything like that. It's just I wasn't exposed to it growing up. And I was like, that's completely fair, Now, granted, her idea of a fun, day off is watching the Cowboys game and getting wine drunk. But, very different from me, from what I'm used to. But you know what? That's fine. Worst case scenario, we, bump uglies, cuddle, have a fun time, but it doesn't work out in the long run. So be it. That's part of the point of me even having something akin to a roster in the first place. It is very, very much about meeting new people, making friends, having experiences, maybe finding somebody. It's all, I take it all in stride, and I treat it all as a very healthy, open, communicative thing. So all intents and purposes are, all parties are operating on the same level of information. Now, that being said, she works late. She's more of a night owl than me. But, I was up doing chores and playing way more Minecraft than I fucking should have at 11:30 at night. I shut everything down. She texts me, at 11:30, hey, you want to call for a little bit? Because we were texting back and forth. I texted her at 11, said, hey, checking in, haven't heard from you all day. I hope you had a good, relaxing day or whatever. you know, and she says she wants to call. And I'm like, okay, bet. And she gets on the phone. She is fucking gone, dude. She's half in the bag. She's sloshed. And, which is like, whatever. Like, I knew she's a drinker. Fair be it. Like, you work at a restaurant and you're single and you are somebody from Texas who is living in bumblefuck New York with nobody. Like, I understand, like, drinking for fun. Fine, whatever. Here's the thing. When it comes to opposites colliding, you know, especially in, you know, encounters, sparkle, or dating or anything like that, you know, I can deal with a lot of difference as long as there is like an understanding that, like, yeah, we have a lot to learn from each other and there's a respect and all that. And the problem is that she calls me, or I call her rather, because she wanted to call. I extended the courtesy. She calls me, or I call her rather. We start talking, and she starts asking me some questions, and I'm like, all right, whatever, because again, no ego or shame. And she says, how are you at a position where like you didn't have money for groceries? And I'm like, well, you know, I work a job. Like, I got a lot of hours this week, but that's not guaranteed every week. And, you know, like, money's just tight and the economy's fucked and it's hard to find a second job. I'm not saying it not for lack of trying. And then she says, well, what did you apply to today? And I'm like, okay, I like go down the list and I'm like, I feel like I'm talking, and I'm like, and this kind of is shitty. I feel like I'm talking to my fucking stepdad, trying to justify him to him, like that. Yeah, I'm like doing everything I'm supposed to be doing, which is, you know, it's not a great feeling, but like whatever. I'm like, she's drunk, whatever. This is like 5-10 minutes into it. 1 hour later, like she has asked me question after question. She's asked like, where did you, like, you had a job making 6 figures. I mean, like, granted, it was like 95, but whatever. Like, where does that money go? And I'm like, well, I had an ex-girlfriend who I was helping to pay for her fucking existence in one of the most expensive parts of Chicago. You know? I was also paying for my own fucking existence. And money's tight. And, you know, I was living paycheck to paycheck for all that time because of, you know, it's that and expenses and, you know, me not knowing how credit cards worked in regards to like thinking I had to pay them off completely every fucking month. And it was like a whole thing. And then she starts asking me about the timeline from like then to now and like where I was couch hopping and like what was the things going on there and why couldn't I get a job in my field in LA and like all of these different things. And I'm like, and then why were you in Orlando? And then why were you in here? And then why are you in the Hudson Valley? And I'm like, fine. And I get through all of those and I go and I basically tell the story from like beginning to end to where we are today, like all the entire timeline. And that's all well and good. And she was just saying like, something's not computing. And I say like, oh, you're drunk, so maybe it's not picking up. She's like, I mean, agree to disagree. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was like, listen, I gave you all of the information. Maybe it's just because you're like, I basically said at 12:30 at night, listen, I got surgery in the morning. I gotta go. She's like, oh yeah, it's better. Good night. I'm sorry, good night. And then she hangs up. And then I block her on everything because the amount of like apathy that was present in the tail end of that conversation it gave me the ick. It gave me the ick. Like, I gave you a detailed timeline of everything that happened, and she had the audacity to say to me, I just don't understand how somebody at my age does not have their life together. Before I started this story, I said that I can deal with people being like having different interests and stuff and connecting with people that are different from me, as long as there's like a respect there. That phrase right there gave me the ick. Because we're 27. She's 28, I'm 27. We are in our 20s in the worst recession since the Great Recession, and by all metrics, the only reason it's not worse right now is because the AI bubble hasn't popped yet. It really comes down to the reason it was like this was classism, frankly. She said, how did you survive in the year that I was like living between moving to LA, between like losing my job and moving to LA? Well, I said, well, I was scrappy. I, was living off of EBT. I was making a little bit of money here and there, like a client here or there. I would, I sold a bunch of bonds that I had gotten a gift when I was a little kid. And she's like, oh, you're a trust fund baby. And I'm like, no, it was like $2,000 worth of bonds that were bought like after I was born and given as gifts. Like, it's I think a big part of it is because she was drunk and belligerent and wasn't really being as present. But you know what? I'm good at, activities, sparkle. It's her fucking loss. Especially with how, if I'm being honest, like, desperate she was at a time in regards to like wanting to like connect and hook up. But and I would have loved to, and I would have, and like I said, I have dated the rainbow. I am open to people who are like vastly different from me in terms of interests. It's just that classist behavior, that lack of respect, it just doesn't feel good, man. And any ladies who had made it to this far in the episode, like, I may not know intrinsically what it's like to get the ick the same way that you do, but I feel like I got a hint of it, and I get it. I get it in some capacity, so. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you for listening. That is another chapter closed on my little black book, and thank you for listening to this episode. If you liked this episode, we've got a ton of other ones you can go listen to right now. Please consider doing so. The ad revenue helps keep the lights on. And if, and only if, you have the financial wherewithal to do so, please consider going to HIMedia.gg/tip. There you can get a bunch of awesome perks for the low price of $3 a month. All service through our amazing Discord, which you should absolutely join at the link down below. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been HIMediaTV. I have been your host, Evan from HIMediaTV, and I will see you guys next time.